And a lot of people just think, oh, FHA, threeplex, fourplex, boom, let's go. And it's not that simple. And it's really, in my mind, VA buyers don't know the luxury they have when it comes to purchasing and controlling a big portion of real estate.
I've got dreams, I've got dreams, I've got dreams to find a way out. I've got dreams, I've got dreams, I've got dreams to find a way out.
Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Junkie Podcast. Today, we're joined by a remarkable guest, Mark Kong. Mark is a former Army officer and West Point graduate with a fascinating journey in real estate. I first met Mark back in 2018 when he was skillfully flipping houses while still serving in the Army. His expertise and network were invaluable to me as I often reached out to him for a tip or trade contact while building out my rental portfolio. Mark's transition from the military to launching Evolution Mortgage has been impressive, and he's here to share his story and insights into the world of VA loans, a topic crucial for veterans and active duty service members looking to enter the real estate market. So with that, let's welcome Mark to the show.
Keith,
Good to see you, man.
likewise, I love the setup.
Where are you right now? Like, what state?
So when I got out of the Army, I settled in El Paso, Texas. I got out of the Army from Fort Bliss, and I was considering moving back to Colorado Springs. But yeah, I decided to stay here. So it's interesting because I don't have like a lot of friends here. And I'm very focused. And
Well, you're not distracted, you mean, with just other things? I see you're doing like workouts and hikes and all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah, so I try to stay active. Yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah. You're doing the cold plunges pretty religiously.
Literally every single morning. I mean, first thing I do is I pray, I jump in the ice bath, and then I let my body like warm up naturally, and then I go work out, and that's how I start my day every single morning. And it's just from a mental standpoint and just like physical health standpoint, I feel better than I ever have in my life. It's been awesome.
That's incredible. Thanks for setting a great example. And if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 48 years old.
48, and you're saying
Yeah.
like you feel better now.
I feel literally better than I did when I was like 26.
Yeah.
25, 26. Physically, I'm stronger too. Just because I'm religiously working out.
Right.
You know, like after I got out of I didn't stay in, like, how long were you in the Army?
7.5 years.
Okay, so when I got out, I was like, I don't want to do anything with physical activity. I'm done with PT. I'm done with all that. A stupid mindset. But then I just kind of got myself out of shape and just, my cholesterol was high. I had high blood pressure, just all kinds of stuff. And then I was like, okay, I need to make a change. And I started running. And I did that for 5 years, 6 years, just religiously running 4 to 10 miles a day, like 5 days a week. And I just got super skinny and thin. And I did too much on the cardio side. So then over the last right before COVID hit, I was like, okay, I'm going to concentrate on more just building up lean muscle mass, less cardio, strength training, mostly calisthenics. Like I have a pull-up bar. I do a lot of dips. I have dumbbells. But yeah, man, I've been doing that solid for like 5 years. And then once I entered I added the cold plunges in the routine, man, I'm just on another level right now.
Wow. How do you ever feel like once you get out of the cold plunge, you just feel like kind of that chill, like cold to your bones? Like, do you wear warm clothes afterward? Or do you just kind of push through it? Or is that really not a thing for you?
I mean, it depends. Like when it's 32 degrees and I get out of that and I'm stepping out into like 19-degree temperatures outside, all the water that's like built up on my hair, my beard, everything, it like instantly freezes. And then, I feel like my feet hurt because I'm starting to almost get frostbite at that time. So that's where you want it. You don't want to stay at that level for too long. So after going through that, I find it takes me a good 15, 20 minutes to really, stop the shivering. But what I do, you asked me what I do. What I actually do is I get out of the cold plunge and then I go take a cold shower just to rinse off and everything and really soak my face. And again, now I'm stepping in like 52, 53 degree water and it feels warm because I just got out of, 32 degree water, and that warms me up. And then I knock out 100 push-ups. That's like my routine. And then I sit around, I catch up on some email before I head into my workout. It usually takes me about I don't just jump into a workout. I wait like 30 minutes to completely warm up. The most I'll do is just like 100 push-ups. And then I'll start my workout routine. And then I'm fine. Like because I'm working out afterwards, I break it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
But anyway, man, let's get into it. I'm excited. I really do appreciate this. I want to hear your full story, how you got into real estate and even moving to where you are right now. So maybe you can start with, the Army. Let's talk about, like, you went to West Point, right?
Correct.
So
yeah.
What geared you towards joining the Army in the first place and going that route? Getting into West Point, I know that must have been pretty challenging as well, but what ultimately led to that decision?
Yeah, it's a good marketing campaign, right? Which is funny. So I always wanted to join the military, but I grew up in California, and I know you spent a lot of your time in California, and it's very liberal.
Grew up there too. I grew up in San Jose, so yes.
Yeah. So I grew up in Sacramento, not too far from San Jose. And like if you do well in school, your liberal teachers will like give you this message of like you're way too good for the military. Like it's not, And so growing up, like I wanted to join the military, but then, I kind of did well in school and always thought then like, oh, I shouldn't join the military. Well, junior year of high school, West Point starts to send me kind of direct mail marketing after I took the PSAT, I think, and did pretty okay on it. And then I looked up and Forbes had West Point ranked like top 3 in the country, like top 3 schools. It was above like Harvard and Stanford. I was like, what is this? I had no idea what it was. And then the direct mail marketing, they kind of got me. I was like, that looks cool. And I actually only applied to 3 schools, and that was one of them. And the way the admissions process works is I got my acceptance to West Point before either the other 2 schools even got back to me. And so I abandoned those applications. So yeah, that's kind of the story. But I was always like very competitive, in high school. I probably still have that trait a little bit. And, I was like, I can go to the best school. And the way Forbes broke it out, it was like, I remember Williams College was number 1. And then next to it said like $50,000 or $60,000 per year. And the next school, 50, 60,000. And then West Point, it was a 0 with an asterisk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I learned later that asterisk was,
your life.
Years of my life.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have it any other way. It was great experiences. And very thankful for that.
So did you have any like family members or anything that were in the military, or are you the first one?
Yeah, so I always kind of respected the military. Growing up, my grandfather, kind of cool story. He actually just passed away this year, but he was 101. Yeah, no, he lived his high school was bombed by the Japanese in World War II. Then he came over to U.S. illegally, joined the Navy he wanted to go kill Japanese, and he did so. And then when when the war ended, they gave him his citizenship and his GI Bill. And, he became a Christian, on the boat in the Navy and then went to a Christian college in Southern California. And that was kind of like the origin story of my family from that side. So I grew up listening to stories that he would tell and always really respected that. but none of his kids, like my dad or anyone like that, joined the military. So after him, I was the next one in my family to join the military. So there was a big gap, but that was kind of the history there.
So when you went in, did you originally have the intention that, hey, man, this might be my career? I might spend, 20 plus years in the Army, or were you from the very beginning looking at like, you know what, let me start here and just see where I end up?
Yeah, I was 100% sold on doing a career in the military. Um, the interesting thing is, like at West Point, that drive to get better and having a really concrete challenge, kind of like a mountain to climb in front of you, is for sure there. You get out of West Point, you're a young lieutenant, it's there. For me, that was trying to get to Ranger School, then trying to get to Ranger Regiment, all those things. Once you become like a junior officer, and you're a captain, you look at, and at least I did, I looked at like the majors, lieutenant colonels, and it just seemed like I had done all the hard things that I really wanted to do, or at least most of them. There were still some that I hadn't gotten to, but looking at like the next positions, they didn't excite me. It didn't feel like a challenge. It felt like if I was to go down that path, I would become more of a caged animal than I would like this person who's consistently trying to get better and push myself.
Got it.
And I think we all kind of have that drive in us. And for me, in 2019, I was still active duty and I started flipping houses, started getting real estate. And that kind of outlet to kind of do better, become better, push yourself, that became real estate for me versus, the next military school or whatnot. And then it's also interesting because, the military, I knew my set pay schedule for the rest of my career, regardless of
Yeah.
what school I go to, what unit I'm in, etc. And I'm not saying the pay is the end all be all by any means, but it's just like it's a known factor, and that definitely didn't excite me as much as trying to just go do something more.
It's a limitation that you see, that this is it. It's not going to go above this ceiling, right? So how did you stumble into real estate in the first place? Like what got you to the point where you're like, hey, I'm gonna go flip a house?
Yeah. So it's funny because like at West Point, I was a management major, which is essentially like a business major. And we would take essentially field trips to New York Stock Exchange, go visit Facebook in New York City, like these cool field trips. But one thing that I kind of learned is like, if I go into trading stocks and options and all this, like I'm competing with computer speed, trading at the speed of light. And I really don't have like a a magic eight ball or some way to read the market. And so when I started getting more disposable income as a lieutenant, in my mind there was two directions to go. Either go real estate, which is more nitty gritty, or try to like learn stocks, options, stuff like that. But it's like I'm able to save, let's say $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month or more, maybe even $3,000 a month, just from being having more disposable income. It's like, what do I do with it? So I started listening to Bigger Pockets. I unfortunately I don't think the world of that podcast now, but I think back in 2018, maybe it was a little bit better. And I decided to do real estate. So I bought my first house with a realtor. And I asked him, I was like, hey, I'm just going to use you. Can you just like kind of teach me a little bit about the process? Well, did the typical realtor thing, took care of the transaction. I learned nothing. And, and that's fair. That's not a realtor's job to show me behind the curtain. Right. So like, I can only blame them, but so much. But after that, I was like, I don't care how much, money I lose or whatnot. I'm buying my next house without a realtor. And one thing, I guess one lesson from Bigger Pockets at the time I learned is like, hey, if you make mistakes, just consider it your tuition and learn, right? So So, I didn't know what I was doing. I was going on Zillow and the pre-foreclosures were blue. And I'd just make a list in Excel of all these blue pre-foreclosures. And then I was using like whitepages.com to try to figure out who the owners were and calling, trying to email. So I'm looking on Zillow, on these pre-foreclosures. And now I know it's called skip tracing. But I buy my second property without a realtor. And we close in the 230 range and it appraises in the 280 range.
Wow.
And
So did you go to use an attorney or anything, or did you do all the documentation yourself?
I used just a title company.
The title company, okay.
Yeah. And, title agents are sometimes like scared to help you out, but I told the title agent, I'm doing this transaction and not using a realtor. Feel free to help me through this paperwork. Feel free to not. I know it's not your job. But I essentially sat down with the title agent and I had the standard form. And I was like, here's what me and the seller agreed to. And I'm going to fill this out with you sitting next to me, and feel free to help me as much as you want. But if I mess something up, that makes your job harder as a title agent because you don't really know how to close escrow. So they were like, yeah, I can't really help you, but, I could tell you what certain boxes mean. And so, I pretty much could fumble my way through the entire thing besides like, the smaller things like how are you prorating taxes? I didn't really know what that meant at the time. And it's like, according to the current mill levy, right? So some of those things they kind of like maybe gave me a little nudge to get right, but, worked out. And the seller was thrilled that he didn't have to pay any agents and could close with his tenants in there. So yeah, yeah, that's kind of how I got started. And then my mom actually, knew I was getting into real estate and was like, oh, you should talk to a guy named Kevin, who I went to church with back home in Sacramento. And my mom thought like, oh, we were just both interested in real estate. She didn't know that like I was a complete newbie and he was like absolutely crushing it. So before my deployment to Afghanistan, I go and I shadow Kevin for a couple days. And he has like an entire wholesaling operation set up. He has, I think at the time it was over 10 cold callers, all Philippine based. And he didn't use a company. He's managing, he kind of like built his own call center, paying them, wages that were a lot less than you would pay US employees. And instead of hitting niche lists like pre-foreclosures or probate, he was calling every single person who owned a home in Sacramento County.
Just one after the other.
Just one after the other, because and his point is like motivation you won't always find on some list. And so if you're just hitting everyone, high equity, mid equity, low equity, no equity, and with creative finance, you could do something with every motivated seller, really. And I went on 2 appointments with him. He locked up both, both were wholesaled. And I was like, holy cow. And so I kind of told Kevin, hey, can I hop on Mojo Dials and cold call for you for a couple months and then try to copy paste your business model? So like try to start with provide a little bit of value, and the funny thing is I did that and I was cold calling for him for a little bit. And, he's like, hey, I don't need you to cold call for me. Just go do it yourself, And so very thankful for him as a mentor. And he's, never charged me a fee. So many gurus are like selling courses and stuff. He's never like, he just showed me the playbook and didn't, just like give. Very thankful for Kevin.
I can't tell you how many people I get calls all the time where someone's like, hey, yeah, they took some wholesale class from one of these gurus. They spent $10,000 to learn something you could have just bought a book and learned, or you could just search on the internet. They paid someone $10,000 and now they think they have all the tools that they need to go wholesale. And it's crazy because there's just so many of them out there right now because these so-called gurus are just turning them out like crazy. It's pretty sad, actually. So you were blessed to find Kevin, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that taught you the game. You were blessed to find him. There's very few people out there like that are willing to share their knowledge. And that's awesome that you found him.
Absolutely.
Or that your mother connected you with him.
Yeah, yeah, unknowingly. It's funny because she just thought we were like at the same level getting started in real estate.
Yeah.
She had no idea like the disparity between like what he was doing and what I was doing. One thing Kevin taught me was just like the sales, kind of script of when you're having a good conversation with anyone on the phone, cold calling, whether it's you or your cold callers, always capitalize on it. So questions that I'd ask at the end of the call, like let's say, no, I'm not interested. No, I'm not interested. But like you're talking to someone, you're having a good conversation with someone. I would ask, hey, do you know any houses in your neighborhood that maybe need a little bit of love or would be a good fit? And or do you have any other properties? I know this one you're not looking to sell. Do you have any other properties that you're looking to sell or any family members who are looking to sell a property? Right. So it's these follow-on questions. And that's how I got my first deal is someone said no, but so random. They were like, my ex-husband's other ex-wife has a property. Here's the address. Here's where it is. And it's like completely dilapidated in a good area,
And this is all you were focusing all in Colorado Springs at the time?
all in Colorado Springs. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And so, and this is kind of like when you're young, like wholesaler or investor doing off market, when you have a lead like that and that's your only lead, right? You're going to be a lot more tenacious than that, you know, varsity investor who's sending 10,000 mailers a month that's not going to follow up the same way you do. So you could call it beginner's luck, but if you only have 10 leads and you're following up with those 10 leads like you only have 10 leads, your follow-up game better be and should be better than these bigger investors who are just kind of don't have the bandwidth and are sending, thousands and thousands of mailers or thousands of cold calls, et cetera. So I probably had 10 hot leads, and that was the first one I closed, and I did a double cash close. So it wasn't a assignment wholesale, but it was essentially a wholesale. And instead of selling it for like max profit on the back end, I got connected with a flipper, and I started, immediately I know she obviously wanted to get the deal at a discount and not like bid against 50 other cash buyers. But I also knew she could teach me flipping because I didn't want to wholesale forever. I wanted to flip. And so when she made me a cash offer, I said, cool, I'm going to take this cash offer, even though I know I could sell it for more, but I want to essentially buy your mentorship. And I'm not going to go get any other cash offers. And that was Amy Jones. And she's a great mentor of mine and still is to this day. And so I sell it to her. And then on the next property, she walks me through flipping my next one. And if I hadn't had her kind of teach me, here's how you drop contracts, here's how you manage contractors. And she was honest with me. She's like, I'm not going to give you my A-player contractors because those are mine, but I'll give you all my B, contractors. And those B contractors weren't bad contractors, right? And that was really amazing because it doesn't matter how many flips you're doing. You're probably not fully employing your shower glass door guy or your carpet guy. You know what I mean? So in all those things, I got the A player contractors, and then as far as like general contractor to do, your carpet, paint, drywall, stuff like that. Sure, I got a B contractor, but still way better than if I was to go try to find a contractor on Craigslist or Facebook. And so having that was invaluable. And, and I think it just goes to show like this is a relationship industry. And, the more you can build relationships, meaningful relationships with the right people, it's gonna take you far.
Absolutely. I love how you went from being mentored from Kevin to then wholesaling a house to a flipper and then realizing that, you know what, I'm not going to try to auction this off to the highest bidder. I'm going to go with her because she knows what she's doing and I want to learn from her. Then you learn from her how the whole process works. You get her B contact list for contractors and all that. And now you're armed with everything you need to A, find your next house, B, actually get it fixed up, And so let's talk about C. So then after that you went after and at this point did you already you owned a house, right? You bought one house. You were
Yes,
living in it.
I own two houses at this point.
You own two houses at this point. Okay. And you had just one as a rental?
Yes, my departing residence I turned into a rental when I moved into the second house.
Okay.
And that's
the first house, was that VA loan?
they were both VA, and that's the beautiful thing is like, you know, one misconception is you once you buy with VA, you know, you can't buy VA again in the same city. Well, you know, I had a deployment in there, and that's kind of a great reason to purchase again, right? When I deployed, that became a rental, and you know, and then I bought again.
Did you have to refinance?
No.
So you had enough.
Remaining eligibility.
You did. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, they were both, you know, not luxury homes. So, yeah, if I had bought in one fourplex, you know, in Colorado Springs, I probably would have been tapped out on eligibility. But
so you were able to buy two homes using one VA eligibility in this county.
correct.
Right? And you had enough. You had enough. What is that called? Is it called eligibility? No, it's not called eligibility.
Yes,
It's
eligibility.
Called, is it
Yep.
eligibility? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So there's
so
a
the
certain
property I
Explain
bought-
that.
Yeah.
Explain
So
that
the
how that works.
Right. So the first property I bought at 270,000 ish, and I think the county loan limit at that time was just under 600. So I had plenty of remaining eligibility to go and buy a second home. Eligibility, if we want to get into it, you know, we might have to extend the podcast, but eligibility is always limited by the county loan limit of the county you're moving to. So you could be tapped out on eligibility because you bought in Colorado Springs and the county loan limit is $726,000. However, if you move to San Francisco County and the county loan limit there's $1 million, now you've just opened up a little bit more eligibility.
So now you have 300K basically.
Correct. Essentially of purchasing power. Yeah. So the other thing with eligibility is it's actually limitless until you use some of it. So if you have full eligibility, you could, if you qualify, buy a $2, $3, $4 million VA home, let's say in Colorado Springs, and the VA will insure all of it. And the funny thing is, like, the interest rates keep getting better, right? The county loan limit in Colorado Springs is $726,000. When you go conventional and you go above that county loan limit, you buy conventional, you know, at 800K, that rate gets super unfavorable. You know, that rate for conventional, you know, under 726K, like that might be 7.5% right now. And when you go jumbo above that county loan limit, that turns into an 8.5 or 8.5 with points. Like it gets very unfavorable. And these, you know, are just hypothetical terms, right? But I just trying to show the difference in, you know, in deteriorating pricing when you go jumbo with conventional. Well, with VA, when you go jumbo above that kind of loan limit, your rate just keeps on getting slightly incrementally better, at least with us. So the rate I'm able to give someone for a $3 million VA loan is actually slightly better than rate for a 700K VA loan. So
Wow.
I tell people it's very important, especially people that are doing very, very well as veterans, you know, maybe, you know, they're dual income, whatever it may be, and they want to buy $1 million home. My suggestion is make sure you go ahead and restore your VA eligibility, get your VA eligibility back so that you could buy your dream home with the VA loan. Because for multiple reasons, it is the best product. Also, there's no debt to income per se limit on the VA loan. You know, we are closing VA loans that are 75% debt to income. It goes off of residual income calculation, which is just completely different than a debt to income. So residual income calculation, we just have to prove that, you know, let's say a necessary residual income is $2,000. Well, if someone's take home pay is $10,000 and all of their debt is $8,000, then they have $2,000 of residual income, and the VA will say, okay, that's good to go. And that may be 60% debt to income or 70% debt to income. The other thing about VA loan is when it comes to threeplexes and fourplexes, conventional loans have the stricter debt to income limits. And for threeplexes and fourplexes, the FHA self-sufficiency test never came up in COVID because it was 2.5% rates. But now that rates are in the sixes, sevens, eights, most threeplexes and fourplexes are not passing what's called the FHA self-sufficiency test. And the gurus don't talk about this when they make the TikTok reels. And so everyone's like, oh, just buy a threeplex or fourplex with FHA. Well, most of them don't pass the self-sufficiency test. So if you have eligibility as a veteran and you're looking to buy a threeplex or fourplex, there's a huge pool of buyers that just don't exist anymore. And the other thing is for realtors, if you have a veteran buyer who's interested in a threeplex or fourplex, that's like a very hot lead because you're really only competing against investors. Your other like first time home buyers who are looking at house hack and stuff, your conventional, most of them don't qualify and it's very, very hard to do. Now, Fannie and Freddie just dropped their requirement. It used to be 15% down for threeplex, fourplex. They just dropped it to 5%, but still with the debt to income limits and PMI, it's very hard to qualify. And so
it's because the PMI is also going to jack up your payment, and then
right.
the DTI is going to be even harder to get through.
Correct. So just because they dropped it from 15 to 5% doesn't necessarily open up a huge pool of buyers.
Yeah.
And so you do need to have reserves. So if you have a young, lieutenant who has no reserves and wants to buy a threeplex or fourplex, can't do it. You need 6 months of reserves. However,
wait, is that just for conventional or is that for VA too?
That's for VA.
Okay.
Yeah, for conventional, the reserves are a little bit different. But if you have a veteran buyer who has reserves and is interested in a threeplex or fourplex, like that's a really eligible buyer, more so than an FHA and conventional buyer. So and obviously there's a lot of veteran buyers in the Springs. But it's really interesting because right now they're only competing against, in my mind, they're really only competing against other investors.
Yeah. So my daughter joined the Air Force 3 years ago, got married. So they're a dual military household.
Awesome.
They just got done buying their second home. So they bought the first one using her VA. Then they bought another one using her husband's VA. And now they're living in that one now, so they're renting out the first one, and now they're already okay. Well, let's get ready for 3 because they're literally leveraging the VA to kind of get their start in real estate.
Absolutely.
And so the question they had for me, which I'm going to pass on to you, is if they both have eligibility left in the counties they live in, can they combine that eligibility together to go buy a third one? Once they hit that 1 year, required.
Regardless of whether they hit that 1 year or not, if they have a circumstance that is a good enough argument to buy again, they don't necessarily even have to hit that 1 year, right? Let's say they got a short notice PCS orders to a new duty station 6 months later because of a career move or whatnot, right? Like there could be a million reasons. Also, let's say, they had twins, right? And they want a bigger house, right? That is an eligible reason to buy maybe even 3, 4, 5 months later than your initial purchase. So when you close a VA loan, generally I intend to occupy this property for at least 1 year, right? But there's myriad of reasons why that could change. The important thing to make sure it's not mortgage fraud is to make sure that intent was there at the time you signed.
Got it.
What happens after that is, life happens. Life's crazy, right? But if there's a pattern of things, you don't want to build a pattern of trying to skirt around the rules, I don't think. But again, deployments, having more kids, there's maybe bad traffic, wanting your commute to shorten. There's lots of reasons that are valid. Okay, so within VA loans, if you're buying in a scenario like this, there's joint entitlement, and joint entitlement could be a veteran and non-veteran can purchase a house together using the VA loan. and essentially we have to come up with a down payment to cover eligibility gap if it's veteran and non-veteran. And then if it's veteran and veteran, that's considered split entitlement. And we can use your daughter's remaining entitlement and your son-in-law's remaining entitlement to do a split entitlement VA loan. And the way to structure that, it just all depends on the numbers. But let's say house number 1 was 300,000, house number 2 was 300,000, and they're moving to a county where the county loan limit is 726,000. So they each have essentially remaining purchasing power entitlement, let's say, of around $426,000. So they could buy a house at 800,000 and put $0 down by using both veterans' remaining entitlements. They could go over that, and they would need to come up with a 20% down payment of whatever the gap
Of
is.
whatever is over that amount, right? So it's not 20% of the 800 or whatever the price of the home is. It's
Correct.
whatever that's not covered under their current entitlement.
Correct. So if they together, had, you're exactly correct, an entitlement remaining of 500,000, and they're buying a house at 600,000, that gap of 100K is what they'd have to cover. So they'd have to cover 25% of that 100K gap, $25,000. I'm a visual person, so if someone's listening to this and not following, I apologize. I like to whiteboard things, but hopefully that's not too complicated.
Yeah, this is really good stuff. So let me ask you this, and I know this. I've used my VA loan, I want to say like 5 or 6 times, but I regret it. And the reason why I say I regret it is because every time I reused that VA loan, I sold the house that I used to have on it, and I walked away from what is now probably triple the price that I bought it for. So I always regret when I sell. Like I'm a believer in you make money when you buy real estate, not when you sell it. That's just how I do it because I'm into rental properties. But I wanted to talk to you about that because I know I can refinance out. So let's say the house that I'm in right now, which it is, I purchased it with a VA loan. If I was to refinance my house right now, so free up my VA loan, I can then use it to go buy another property, correct?
Not necessarily. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions with VA loan among your kind of veteran players who've been around the block. It encompasses restoration of the VA loan. And this is what so many people and loan officers really jack up. So, and just to challenge your point a little bit is, I wonder every time you sold, because it was primary residence, right? In most of those instances, you probably didn't have to pay any capital gains tax on that appreciation. And so I wonder, right? Because if someone owns a property 2 years, you could sell and essentially not pay any capital gains up to $250 or $500 if married. And so I guess my only challenge to that would be, with that cash, I'm sure you went and bought more rentals, continue to build your portfolio. So I wonder what the opportunity.
No, actually I didn't, because that was before I had any sense on how real estate worked. So no, that was just like, moving from one place to another over the years.
Gotcha.
And not realizing that, man, I should be just holding on to these properties versus selling them. I actually did refinance a VA loan one time, like out of the VA to free it up to buy this house that I'm in right now. But that's the only time that I actually did that. And that was because I was financing a house that I had in California and buying a house here. And I wanted to be able to use my VA to do it. And I had tons of equity in the house in California. So I did that, and I kept that house. I ended up selling it later, but I didn't sell it then. I kept it as a rental. And I got my eligibility back so I could buy the house that I'm in now. But that was the only time that I actually refinanced to get it back. The rest of the times I lived in a house for a couple years, small 2-bedroom, needed more space, sold it, bought a 3-bedroom. And yeah, when I made those moves, I was just walking away with that cash and, not investing it in real estate like I should have been.
Yep. So Depending on how your restoration was done. If you refinance right now to conventional, you may not be able to go use your VA again.
Really?
Correct. Yeah, and I could look it up for you right now. Actually, if you want, we could cut the cut it out for a sec, or cut the show for a second.
Well, we could maybe we could do that afterwards. That's
Sure.
interesting. Why? Like, explain
Yeah.
that a little.
Yeah. So there's a stark difference between basic restoration and one-time restoration. And one-time restoration is once in the veteran's lifetime, and it's a golden ticket. Okay. So to back up, let's talk about my scenario. When I left Colorado Springs, I ended up selling both properties that used VA entitlement. When the veteran sells or disposes of a property, they could then do a basic restoration and get that entitlement back with no asterisks.
Yeah,
Now,
that's what I did. I'm pretty positive that's what I did.
well, that's what you did for most of them.
Yes.
So most of them should have been a basic restoration.
Yes.
If those two properties I kept and I refinanced to conventional, but the veteran me, I retained those properties. So on title, it's still Mark Kong. Once those are both refied to conventional, I cannot do a basic restoration if I still own them. I can do a one-time restoration, and I could pull that trigger only one time. And so if I did a one-time restoration, I would get all my restoration back, right? And then I could go buy a third property using my VA entitlement. Let's say that third property is for $800K and it taps out all the rest of my VA entitlement. Well, now that I've used that, even if I now refi that to conventional 5 years later, I cannot get my eligibility back because I've used my one-time restoration. As long as I retain that third property is the one that my entitlement's tied to. So if I retain that property, I'm never getting my eligibility back. Whether it's conventional, etc. Even if it's paid off in cash, if I retain that property, my entitlement's used. If I sell that third property, I can now do a basic restoration again. So there's always a way to use your VA loan again, depending on what you're willing to dispose of. But it's the one-time restoration. A lot of people don't distinguish it. And there's a misconception among, especially a lot of military specializing realtors, that's just like buy at every duty station, keep buying at every duty station. That's not feasible. And a lot of people think, well, if you just refi to conventional, you could keep buying at every duty station.
You can only do it once. You can only do it once is what you're telling me.
You could maybe do it 5-6 times. It depends on the loan amount of the houses, right? Because I could buy 4 really cheap houses and then pull my one-time restoration and then buy 3 more cheap houses. So it all depends on the loan amounts versus the county loan limits. So it can go more than one time, but that one-time restoration, that card could only be pulled once.
Okay, so let me just for the listeners that are out there, see if I get this right. So let's say my entitlement was $500,000, okay? And I bought a house for $500,000, so it's completely used up. If I was to sell that house and basically pay off that loan, I would get my full entitlement back to go buy another home, correct?
With no asterisks. Yep.
With no asterisks.
And that's a basic restoration.
And that's a basic restoration. And I can do that as many times as I want. So in a 10-year period, I could buy 10 homes. As long as I'm selling and paying off that loan, every single time I get my full restoration back, right?
Correct.
Okay. However, if I don't sell that home and I just refinance out, so I refinance it to a conventional loan, I will have I can only do this one time. I refinance, I can restore that entitlement and I can go buy another one. But after that, if I tried to refinance that second home, I wouldn't be able to buy a third home. Is that correct?
Correct. And I've seen loan officers mess this up. I've had a buddy of mine, I told him, hey, he had a fourplex in Colorado Springs, bought VA. It appreciates, he refinances to conventional. A couple years later, he buys, house and cottage VA that maxes his entitlement. I know I did his one-time restoration because he retained that first house. And another lender was telling him, oh yeah, we'll refi you to conventional investment and go buy with your VA again. And then this loan officer was like, I get a refinance and I get another purchase. It's two deals.
Yeah.
And I told him, no, it's not going to work. And this loan officer, had 20 years experience, probably closed hundreds of VA loans, and still didn't fully understand how restoration entitlement works. Ended up where I just really encouraged my friend. I was like, go above this loan officer because they can close the first refinance for you, right?
Yeah,
that's not going to get stopped. The only thing that's going to get stopped is when they apply to the VA for your new certificate of eligibility. It's going to come back as a fat no.
Yeah.
So this loan officer was just kind of, blowing smoke, and maybe he just didn't know the rules around it. And so I just encouraged my friend, hey, skip the chain, go talk to his boss, talk to his boss's boss, because this is your loan that you're going to refinance from a low rate to a super crappy rate on the promise that you'll have your eligibility back. So you got to, and so he did. And they're like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. And so there's loan officers out there that are considered VA experts, that all their realtors think they're VA experts, that shouldn't be even licensed.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about the VA loan. If I was a first-time home buyer and I wanted to use my VA loan to buy, whether it's just a single family home or actually, one thing I did want to ask you is because you sectioned out triplexes and fourplexes. You didn't mention duplex. Is there a different requirement on the duplex as far as the VA loan is concerned?
For the VA loan, no. The reason why I sectioned that out is for competition reasons. So my point with threeplex and fourplex is VA buyers have a distinct competitive advantage for threeplex and fourplex because of actually an FHA requirement. The FHA self-sufficiency test only applies to 3 and 4plexes, not to duplexes. So my point being is if veteran is bidding on a duplex, they may be competing with a lot more FHA first-time buyers versus for 3plex and 4plex, in my mind, most of their competition is only other investors.
It's not going to be a FHA loan because the self-sufficient, especially with today's rates, self-sufficiency is going to be hard.
It could, but probably not. Yeah.
Got it. Got it.
This year, I've had one deal that's passed an FHA self-sufficiency test, and it didn't pass off the bat. What we had to do is get the seller to buy down the rate with $10K of buy down. Okay. We had to shop the insurance to multiple insurance companies to get the insurance quote down with a super high deductible. Okay. And all this time we're just trying to lower the PITI so it passes self-sufficiency, right? And so we're lowering the PITI by buying the rate down. And I'm talking, we bought the rate down to the lowest rate on the rate sheet. We couldn't go any further. There's no lenders that even offered a fatter buy down for a better rate. And then on the other hand, we had to fight with the appraiser to get to change, and we're just praying because the appraiser could have told us to kick rocks. And it wasn't me, it was the borrower. I can't do this with the appraiser, but the borrower's, trying to get the appraiser to change the rental amounts because it goes off the rental amounts on the appraisal from, let's say $800 to $900, right? So on this side, we're trying to lower the PITI. On this side, the borrowers, and he was successful. And the appraiser's like, you know what, kind of listen to the argument, listen to some rental comps. And he redid the report, which is very rare, to a higher, higher rental amounts. And so that only passed kind of by luck of the draw, if you will, or an appraiser who's willing to redo their report. And that's what we had to do to even barely pass self-sufficiency. And that was one of many this year. And a lot of people just think, oh, FHA, 3plex, 4plex, boom, let's go. And it's not that simple. And it's really, in my mind, VA buyers don't know the luxury they have when it comes to purchasing and controlling a big portion of real estate.
True. And you know what? I really hate the FHA loan, honestly, because of not just the self-sufficiency test part, but that PMI that will never go away until you refinance out of that FHA loan. At least with a conventional loan, you can once the home is appreciated, you can contact the bank and you can get the PMI removed. You cannot do that with an FHA loan. It's stuck there forever until you refinance it, and I think that's horrible. That's a big chunk of your payment every month.
Well, FHA definitely is not for like your more savvy people. So the other thing about that monthly mortgage insurance with FHA is it's the same regardless of credit score. So if someone's to buy a duplex or fourplex 5% down conventional,
they're going to pay PMI still, but it's not going to be there forever.
But more importantly than that, that PMI correlates to their credit score.
Got it. Okay.
So if they have a 750 credit score, their PMI for conventional is going to be much better than if they had a 580 credit score. But for FHA, that monthly mortgage insurance is the same regardless of whether you have an 800 credit score or a 600 credit score. So again, it's not to dog on the FHA, and for honestly, for low credit individuals just trying to buy a primary, FHA definitely serves a purpose. But when the gurus talk about FHA for investment purposes, it's definitely more limited than people will advertise.
Well, definitely being a veteran and having the VA loan is you're one step ahead of everyone else. So let's talk a little bit more about the VA loan as far as you mentioned credit score. What is the lowest credit score I need to have in order to qualify for a VA loan?
It depends on who you talk to, right? If you give Veterans United a call, they say minimum 620 credit score. Okay. The thing is, every lender is allowed to have their own overlays. Is there a minimum VA credit score? No, there's not.
There's not.
As a broker, I have access to lenders that will go down to a 500 for a VA. Okay.
And I assume you're paying a price for that though, right?
Well, each lender is going to have their own credit buckets and rates that correlate to those credit buckets. So yes, someone with a 505 credit score is not going to get the same rate as a veteran with a 680 credit score, but it is feasible. Okay. Now, some lender could say they could do a 480 credit score VA loan. Okay. Also, another good question is like, what's the max VA loan amount? Well, there is none. The VA doesn't dictate a max loan amount. If there's a lender that'll fund a $35 million VA purchase, according to the VA handbook, it would be VA insured. Now, each lender again has their overlays, and I actually want to dive into overlays a little bit here, but most lenders, their VA max loan amount's about 3.5 million. So if someone asks me, what's your max VA loan amount? I usually, instead of giving them a long answer, which I'm happy to do, I usually just say, hey, for most of my wholesale partners that I work with, and I work as a broker because that's where I believe I get the best rates. But for max VA loan amount, I usually say 3.5 million. But if I needed to find a lender that would do a 5 million VA loan, I could probably do so, right? So speaking of overlays, every lender is allowed to have their own overlays. And the reason why I think this is important is because some lender might deny you for VA loan at a 60% debt to income, but another lender might be okay with a 70% debt to income for VA, as long as it passes residual income. The other thing is, these overlays, lenders can also apply them to their assumptions. So I may qualify a veteran for a 70% DTI loan. However, all these lenders have very low incentives to process these assumptions. And assumptions are something that's super hot right now. You've done them for your clients. But a lender may be approving loans out the gate, new loans, regardless of DTI, but they may put a 41% DTI overlay on their assumptions because as just a way to block them, because they're making no money on assumptions, so might as well just deny as many as possible, right? So And realtors don't know this, and realtors will just say, "Oh, the lender denied the assumption; they broke the law." And it's like, well, what lenders can't do is they can't just not receive a 1003 mortgage application for assumption. They're required to process assumption paperwork. They could be slow, right? There's federal laws on the timeline in which they need to receive that application and either issue a conditional approval or a denial letter. But they could just put overlays on it that are super unfavorable to pretty much deny the majority of assumptions, or as many as they can. And we also talk secondary financing. A lot of lenders and people are like, "Oh, I know a lender that'll cover the gap and do a second loan for the gap." Well, the VA handbook says that second lien has to be assumable. So is this second lender making a small second loan assumable? First of all, probably not. And if they are, can that first lender just deny it for an overlay saying that they don't allow secondary financing? Yes, they can. Right. So what I dislike is a lot of the messaging around, "Oh, this loan's assumable, this loan's assumable." Has that agent even contacted, or has the borrower even contacted the current servicer to see what the requirements and overlays are for that assumption? As a listing agent, I think if you're going to advertise assumability, one, clarify what that gap is between the purchase price and the sale amount. First of all, that's almost never done, but please do that, right? Second of all, have your seller contact the servicer and figure out the process step by step for assumption, right? Oftentimes it starts with like a limited power of attorney so that new borrower could even contact the servicer. And then also what their requirements and their overlays are for that assumption process. Because their overlay, again, might be 41% DTI, whereas no one really has that overlay for VA purchases.
Got it. Wow, that's, this last VA assumption I worked with a client on, he bought basically a triplex.
Mm-hmm.
It literally took over 100 days. It was, and that was emailing and calling the lender like every single day. He was calling, the seller was calling, I was calling, we were all calling, and it was just, it was in the end awesome opportunity because he got a 2.75% interest rate, but it just took forever. So definitely worth it, but I didn't realize that they could have these overlays in place that completely just shut the whole thing down. So you're thinking, hey, we're in contract for this house and we're going to assume the loan. The lender can legally put the brakes on and no, you're not assuming this loan because of their overlay. And they have the power to do that, and the VA can't get in between that in any way?
The VA can't force a lender to lend on a deal.
Got it. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, lenders are allowed to have their own. There could be a VA lender out there that puts their VA overlay at a 720 credit score. They don't want to lend anything in that credit bucket under 720. That's completely allowable. So there's certain rules that they do have to follow. There's certain rules they don't have to follow. I think the important thing to note here is most lenders and servicers don't have an incentive, financial incentive, and don't get paid to process assumptions. So if you're the owner of one of these companies, how much manpower you're going to dedicate to a department to process these assumptions? Okay, and even being able to call and email the lender is actually a step above some lenders.
Oh, I
my
know.
brother-in-law did a VA assumption, and everything was via snail mail. He had to snail mail in a 1003 mortgage application, and that took closer to 6 months to close.
We had the same thing, but luckily, a month into it, they transferred the loan to another lender, and that lender was much easier to work with. But the first lender we were working with, I kid you not, like the emails we were getting back had to be like Chat GPT or something, because they were just like completely automated. Every time we'd reach out, it was like we had to start the whole thing over, conversation again. We were even referencing the case number and everything, and it was like they responded back with the same generic thing. And it was ridiculous. They definitely didn't make it easy. And then, thank God, though, they transferred the loan, and the new lender was easy to work with, and we got it done.
Yeah, great work, by the way. That's hard to do. Even finding that deal for your client. I know we've talked a little bit about offline, but Great work. That's very hard to do. And
Yeah,
not many
it was.
agents, whether in the springs or otherwise, would go through that amount of work to secure a deal for their client. So
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an opportunity if you can get it, because I mean, 2.75, 3% interest rate. Like, if you could figure out a way to grab one of those properties up and not have to, what is today's rate? Right now, it's like what, 7, 8%.
well, it's always really tough to quote rate because there's a lot of lenders out there that'll say, "Hey, my rate's 6.5," but they're baking in a point or they're
Yeah,
baking in a point and a half.
yeah,
So we, for us, our goal is to always be kind of half a point to a quarter point better than most lenders out there with the same fees, right? So if they're charging 1 point, our goal is that if we charge you at the point, we're better in rate by a quarter, 0.5%. So
nice.
we've, we've structured our company with very low overhead, very low marketing budget. And there's a lot of people out there that, would rather work with a lender, that's not us. But our goal is there are good agents out there that would rather work with a lender that has really competitive rates than work with a lender that maybe has a higher marketing budget to pass along to them, because ultimately, typically the client's kind of paying that bill at the end of the day, in my opinion. Yeah, that's how we structure, and we've kind of said, hey, the people that that want to use us are the type of people we want to work with. Really excited about what this next year holds. Maybe even we'll have a refi season come in the door. But regardless, our goal is just to continue to build kind of the right way.
We kind of skipped over this part. I do want to hear your story of, you were working with Kevin, you learned the wholesaling process, you then wholesaled that first property to a flipper, you learned the flipping process, then you started finding your own deals and doing your own flips, right?
Yep.
And then you got your real estate license at some point, right?
Correct.
And you did that primarily so you could, what was that? Was for yourself, or was that to help other people, or what inspired you to get your license?
Primarily to list my own deals on the back end, and two, to be able to run comps with MLS access.
Nice. Okay. And then you got into the loan industry. So you started
Yeah.
your own company after you got out of the Army, right?
So yes, and just to kind of answer the underlying question, it's like, why did you get into lending? Well, once I got my license as an agent, and I post on social media, I'm flipping this house, doing this, you start to be seen as a real estate expert. And I think people would reach out to me a lot more than they'd reach out to their agent people in their sphere of influence. Hey, Mark, I'm looking to sell my house. Hey, Mark, I'm looking to buy. Because you're seen solely as an expert versus being seen as someone who needs to make a sale. And so, I ended up I think I did, in the year where I was really doing the most business as an agent, I think I did over 20 transactions as a realtor, both on the buy and sell side. Because people within my sphere would just come to me, and people would refer to me, hey, Mark knows about real estate, I'm going to connect you with my brother. And I would, start with value, give them advice, and say, by the way, like, I'm a licensed agent and I'm very good at real estate. How about I help you list your property, or how about I help you buy your property? And so I did a lot of transactions as a realtor, and I would be showing up to the closing table, and one person who I know is high credit VA would be getting a 3%, and I'd have the same closing that same week, and the buyer was getting a 2.5 or a 2.75. And I'm like, what is how? And then I noticed there's some lenders who had good reputations, and they'd only give pricing exceptions if the borrower shopped them. So it's like you had to shop them to get a good rate.
Yeah. So you had to get a term sheet from one lender and then bring it to another one just to get their rate down. So you had to do that kind of thing.
All these games, and I'm like, what the heck? And so, I love to see behind the curtain. That's another reason why I got my real estate license. So I'm like, I'm gonna go get my mortgage license, to try to see behind the curtain. And at the time, I was kind of recruited and was set to join Loan Depot. However, after I got my license and I start to have these deeper conversations with lenders and see behind the curtain, I realized going to Edge Home Finance, which is a broker shop, had better rates and I could get better rates at the broker shop. And so I'm like, I felt bad, but I was like, hey, look, I know I was going to go to Loan Depot, but I'm going to go to Edge because in my opinion, better rates. And I also wanted to kind of hack the Burr method and be able to get good mortgages for myself. And so I ended up going the broker route. And then, once you go the broker route, you realize that not all brokerages have access to the same rate sheets. And it has to do with what the broker sets their kind of back end comp at, right? So a lot of people, and this kind of annoys me in the broker community, they're just like, I'm a broker, so I get better rates. Well, it's like, well, maybe. You have the ability to shop between, let's say, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 back end wholesale lenders, however many you're signed up with. But depending on what, and the borrowers don't necessarily see the broker comp, or they don't actually understand it. So just because you're a broker, there's probably some retail shops that are beating you, depending on where you set your comp. So when I was at Edge Home Finance, it's funny. There's a guy at Loan Depot. And he was former Ranger Regiment guy, very competitive guy. He'd call me all the time. He'd be like, Mark, VA loan, 720 credit score, 400K, 80903 zip code. What's your rate? He'd call me all the time. And we were 1 year apart. We're both West Pointers. He graduated 1 year behind me. And as at Edge Home Finance for about 8 months at this point, and I wanted to go start my own broker shop and have a more lean company and better rates. Okay. And essentially the goal I had was to have our rates better by about 80 to 90 basis points. And where I was at was already extremely competitive. So I was like, I want my rates to be scary good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Jordan calls me one day and I was like, hey, by the way, like I plan to leave my current brokerage and start my own brokerage. And here's kind of what I want to do. And he's like, he told me, hey, my aunt's in the mortgage industry. I've actually been talking to her a lot about how to start my own company. And like, I want to be entrepreneurial in this. And that aligns with what I want too. And so we started to have this conversation of partnering to do this. And that was about 1.5 years ago. And in October of last year, so we just crossed the 1 year mark is when we launched the company. And big props to him because I, had the assisted living facility. I flipped houses. I had my hand in multiple things, and lending was kind of one of them. Whereas him at Loan Depot, he was licensed in all 50 states, or at least he had the ability to kind of originate in all 50 states through his company. And that was his livelihood. And, when you start a company in the financial industry, you have to go by state and apply with each regulator to be licensed in each state. And, we dropped down to 0 states for a while, and then we picked up Colorado and Texas fairly quickly. But like our application has been in with California for 8 months now, and it's still not approved. So like we kind of took a big risk. Thankfully we're in 9 states right now, which is a lot and plenty. And we cover, probably a lot of the population of the US. We should have California on board soon. We have 9 more applications that are in the works. So we should be in 18 states by about mid next year. But big props to Jordan, my business partner, because he left a really comfortable environment to be like, no, what it means to serve the veteran communities is to have the most competitive rates in an environment where you don't need to, right? Veterans United, who does the most volume by any lender or VA in the country, they are not very competitive, right? But they could post on social media all day that they're the #1 VA lender. And it's like, okay, sure. Yeah, by volume. But like, are you actually doing right by the veteran community? Well, debatable.
That's awesome. I love how you got into the industry. You're like, because you were basically the one struggling and from the very beginning, you're like, okay, how am I going to get started? You're going to learn from someone else. And you're always constantly looking to help people, right? At the end of the day, it's like you had people coming to you, hey, Mark, what should I do about this? What should I do about this? So what did you do? You got your real estate license. And then you started your own brokerage because you were like, you know what? I don't want to be stuck with Loan Depot's rates. I don't want to be stuck with this other company's rates. I want to be able to find the best possible deal for my client.
Correct. And, even now that I'm a broker owner, I have negotiation power based on the volume we do with our back end wholesalers to negotiate, to bargain on behalf of our clients. So yeah, it's kind of the thing. It's like, once you know better, you should do better. Right.
Yeah.
So like when my business partner first joined Loan Depot, that team he was on, really competitive compared to retail, compared to industry wide, compared to the first institution he was at. He truly believed he had the best rates when he was at Loan Depot. And when he started calling me, the company I was at, it got underneath the skin. And it's one of those things like, well, now that you know better, you should do better. And likewise, when I first got to that company, I thought, because I knew they were better than X, Y, and Z and better than so many retail shops, I thought we were the best. But then it's once I realized, there's actually a broker in the National Capital Region area, DC, Virginia, Maryland, who posted about how his company was set up, where his comp was set, how he's being super competitive. And I was like, wait, he's done this. And it's like, okay, well, once I know better, it's like, well, now it's time to do better. And so, I think the same thing went for Jordan, my business partner. It's like, once he knew someone was better than him, like that got underneath his skin, and neither of us are very salesy. So it's like, I don't want to show up on a sales call and try to convince someone I'm the best, knowing I'm not. Like, I'm not going to show up to that call very well. But if I truly believe that the way we're set up is best serving veterans as far as having competitive rates, et cetera, like I show up to calls differently, and I
absolutely.
discourage someone from shopping my rate, it's like, cool, like go see what else is out there, so it's exciting, and it turns sales more into service. And so, yeah.
That's great. I mean, that's exactly how I got into real estate as far as my license goes. Right. Here I am out here. I'm rehabbing homes, and I'm posting a little bit on social media. And then I end up quitting my 9-to-5, getting out of the rat race. And I have friends and family going, dude, what are you doing, man? Like, teach me. And I was like, you know what? I have all these people coming to me. I'm helping them out, giving them, advice. I might as well get my license and cut the middleman out. And even for myself, I found that like working with just, regular agents that are out here, they didn't really have my best interest in hand. Like the only way to really do that is to do it yourself like you did. And I genuinely like want to help people and see them succeed. And I do believe that real estate is, it is. It's there's no questions about it. It's the biggest builder of wealth ever is real estate. So to see other people start out and to be able to help clients that thought they couldn't never buy a home, and at the same time maybe get out of debt at the same time that they're buying a house, which we worked with one client together that was able to do that. That's awesome, man. You're really doing a service, and I commend you for that, Mark. How can people get a hold of you if they're interested in, seeing what products you have and working with you? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, my cell phone number, really. I'll send you, well, I think you already have my digital business card that has website, application link, phone number. Evolutionmortgage.com is our website. So you can go there. Feel free to, add me on Facebook or anything like that. So, but yeah, I'm one phone call or text away. I'm still originating. I'm easy to find.
Evolution Mortgage. What made you guys come up with that name?
Want to be better every day. And it sounds cliche, but the industry is going to change. The company shouldn't change or shouldn't stay the same, right? So right now, we're a team of 7, right? That's going to grow over time. And, as things change, right now, the back end wholesale lenders that we have, maybe there's new players that come up on the map in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So the industry is always changing. It should be changing. We should be changing at a company to get better all the time. And there's decisions we made from the get-go of like, we want to be better, right? The operating system backend platform that we started with was different from the company Jordan came from, the company I came from, but it was the most promising as far as this is the platform that's going to get better over the next 3, 4, 5 years. So every decision we make is based on getting better to keep that competitive edge for ourselves and for our clients. And yeah, we just want to continue that, moving forward.
Awesome. Well, I definitely commend you guys for that. That's awesome. Veterans helping veterans. There's nothing better than that. And anyone else.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Mark. Well, we covered a lot today. I didn't expect us to go this long. We probably could have even broken this up into 2 podcasts, kind of like your beginning journey, your wholesaling, flipping, and all that, which we didn't dive too much into. But I think you definitely brought a lot. You actually gave me a lot of insight on the VA loan stuff I didn't even know. So that's pretty awesome, and I do appreciate that. I will definitely call you whenever I need someone or whenever I need some help. I know you'll always be there. You always have been there. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. All right, Mark. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care.
All right. Bye-bye.